GDLS Canada, an industry leader dedicated to supporting our customers and the community.
Dave Arsenault, 65 years old, born June the 10th, 1956, and born right here in Halifax. Currently living in St. John, New Brunswick. My nickname when I played junior was Dead-Eye Dave, just because of my accuracy for my shooting back in those days, which lasted a few years, but since gone. When I first started lacrosse, it was back in 1970, just right after the Canada Games. You had the Canada Games here in 1969, and that's where I first saw lacrosse. They started up a youth organization the following year, so I joined the Dartmouth organization. And played there for a few years, played the midget league, and played 1 year junior. I coached a couple of teams here in Nova Scotia when I was 17 and did some refereeing and that, so that got me involved with the volunteer side of lacrosse. And in 1975, I moved to St. John. I went to the police academy and then moved to St. John right after that. Canada Games. That set it off. That started up the youth organizations here in Nova Scotia and went from there. I was a police officer for the city of St. John for 35 plus years and spent half the time on the street, and then I was in K-9 for 10 years and then supervisor on the street for a few years, and then I retired. When I moved to St. John, I come across Bruce Logan and his brother Dave and Laurie McKinney and a few other guys who played junior lacrosse, and I was still junior age, so that started me off in St. John playing lacrosse. Eventually we aged out, and a group of us decided that we wanted to start up a youth lacrosse league in the city of St. John. So Bruce Logan's dad, Rod Logan, got involved. Laurie McKinney's dad got involved, and NHL hockey player Gordon Drillin got involved. I think Rod probably brought him on board. So those three gentlemen and myself met the director of the recreation department for St. John, and they convinced him to give us a rink, or let us use a rink there in the city of St. John to get lacrosse off the ground. So that winter I went around, I did a lot of clinics in schools, recreation centers, and then they had a player registration there in the spring, and enough kids to come out. And we started up the St. John Lacrosse Association. So coaches, the people they recruited were coaching with the parents of the players. We get them to referee as well, some of the players and that. So we started up a league at that time. I think it was around 1980. So we ran that lacrosse league for about 10 years. That led up to the Canada Games in 1981. A gentleman by the name of Jerry Kelly there from Fredericton. He was the head coach of the Canada Games team in '81, and I was the assistant coach. So we got players out of St. John and Fredericton. We had a youth program then. And we took the kids up to Thunder Bay to compete at the Canada Games. Then we had the Canada Games in 1985. Jerry stepped aside and because of work commitments, so I continued on as head coach of that team. Played the Canada Games at the Beaverbrook Rink in St. John. The rink was packed. People were literally hanging off the ceiling to watch the games. That's when we had the Gate brothers from BC. Were playing for Team BC at that point. John Grant Senior, coach of the Ontario team. Anyway, that was an exciting time for lacrosse in St. John, where the rink was packed all week. Very, very popular venue for people to go to. I stuck around doing the technical director's job for the St. John Lacrosse for another couple of years, but at that point in 1987, I had to leave because I joined the K-9 unit for the police force, and I wasn't able to continue volunteering for lacrosse simply because of the time commitment for the K-9 unit. So unfortunately, no volunteers stepped up to keep the program going for the St. John Lacrosse. So about 10 years after that, I left the K-9 unit in St. John. So anyway, these couple of young fellows asked me to start lacrosse up again, so I agreed to do it. And just by chance, I happened to meet Bruce Logan in the Pedway system at the shops at City Hall there in St. John. Told Bruce what we were up to, and then Bruce said that he'd be more than happy to help out. So it turned out to be a godsend because Bruce is such an outstanding volunteer with his vision and promotion and organization skills. So we started up the Fundy Lacrosse Association. So we had a core of about 7 or 8 volunteers. We had our registration that year was 640 odd kids, and we kept those numbers up for a few years. A lot of work, and a lot of volunteers were recruited to keep the game going. Yes, we ran that lacrosse league for quite a number of years. It was basically a full-time job. Did some work for Lacrosse New Brunswick. I think it was technical director, I can't remember now. Yeah. I did so much. Eventually, when I retired from the police force, I was hired by Lacrosse New Brunswick to be technical director for Lacrosse New Brunswick. Yeah. And at the same time, the Canadian Lacrosse Association was looking for an area coordinator for New Brunswick and PEI. So that was two part-time jobs. Yeah. That I did both. So my job at the time was to help get lacrosse going in Prince Edward Island and in other parts of New Brunswick. So the very first thing I did was reach out to Prince Edward Island and see if there's anybody interested in stepping up and getting lacrosse organized over there. So I did have 2 people step up, Jason McDonald and Norman McGiprick. 2 of them stepped up, and we started a box lacrosse program over there. So I spent quite a bit of time in PEI that year. In the same year, I was approached by Jason Peters of the Aboriginal Sports Organization, and to see about going to the Aboriginal communities in New Brunswick. So I went to pretty well every one of them and left sticks behind. Did a lot of clinics that year, traveled around New Brunswick. And all the centers that I went to got a couple dozen sticks left in the community and balls and stuff like that. The issue we had is just no history within those communities, so we never had a tough time getting people to step up and continue coaching that. We did, Dave Hayden and I did a coaching clinic for the Aboriginal coaches, and we did certify 10 of them, so to help bring the game along. So I did that for work with the Aboriginals fairly close for about 3 years. Got lacrosse going, like I said, in PEI. They eventually switched over to field lacrosse, so that's still going pretty strong over there. One of the other areas I went to was in Hampton, New Brunswick, and got lacrosse going there. But they ran a box lacrosse program and a field lacrosse program, and they did very well. They had some outstanding volunteers in that community. Oromocto started lacrosse up there. They had some good volunteers here as well to get lacrosse going there, and they're still existing. And just before I left the technical director job for the Lacrosse New Brunswick, I got lacrosse going up in northern part of New Brunswick. I forget the name of the area now, in Perth Hanover area. Yeah, so they got lacrosse going there, ran a lot of clinics up there, and had enough kids come out that they started the league up just before I finished. My job most of the time was technical director of these Lacrosse New Brunswick and of the Fundy Lacrosse Association. I think it was in 2003 the Canadian Lacrosse Association started up the PeeWee Nationals, and of course each province wanted to send a team there. So Bruce Logan asked me if I would take responsibility for putting a PeeWee team together. That was a lot of fun. The kids only been playing for a couple of years, and basically just reached out to the better athletes of the PeeWee age group and invited them for tryout sessions. So I went to Moncton. They had clinics here and camps in Moncton and in St. John and Fredericton, and just to give the kids a little more experience with the stick in their hand and give them some coaching there from my level of coaching. So we put a team together. in that winter, and we selected 18 kids, and the kids worked hard all winter. In the spring, we had Chris Sanderson came down twice to run camps for the kids, so that was a huge benefit doing that. And Colin Doyle and Chris Driscoll and came down. Brody Merle was down. They did some camps here in St. John, so the kids all went to their camps as well to get that coaching at that level. We took the PeeWee team to the Nationals. The kids did very well. Our first game, I'll never forget it, was against Team Ontario, and Ontario was quite confident themselves, and as they should be. Anyway, just by chance, we scored their first goal. Well, that got Ontario talking. We held her home actually pretty good that game. I think they beat us 11-3 or something like that. But it was a very respectable score, and our kids were pretty jacked up. And our first goal we scored was a nice pick and roll play that Chris Anderson taught the boys, and they scored a nice goal. Anyway, I think Chris Driscoll, I believe, was coaching the Team Ontario, I think. Anyways, it was a pretty good experience. The kids ended up, we lost the gold in the gold medal for the B division. We lost against Saskatchewan by a goal, but it was a barn burner of a game. So the kids were pretty excited. Following year, I took the Bantam team out to West. Mike Fox looked after the PeeWee team the following year. And I put a squad together. We went out to BC, played the Nationals out there. Did pretty good. We spent, that summer we spent 2 weeks in Ontario. Went to Chris Anderson's lacrosse camp there, saw him and Brody Merle. Looked after the kids there for 3 or 4 days, whatever it was. And then we played some local teams, or we played at the A level with that, this Bantam team there, played at the A level with that, around that neck of the woods. And then a few weeks later, we were landed out in BC and played the Nationals there. We played in the gold medal game against Nova Scotia, and we had beaten them in the round robin 9-1 or 9-2 or something like that. So the boys were quite confident that we would win the gold medal game, but we didn't. Nova Scotia gathered themselves and beat us in the gold medal game, so that was kind of disappointing, but it was still fun. My best memory from that game is we played against BC, and our kids were pretty jacked up to play against Team BC. So it was a interesting game. It was quite rough. I remember fans leaving the other arena and coming over and watching our game. It was just a good lacrosse game. Ontario, or BC, obviously won the game, but our kids stepped up and fought quite hard to look good. So yeah, then I also coached several other teams at the Nationals and stuff like that. Back in the early days, I coached junior teams out in New Brunswick to go to the Nationals, and involved with one senior team. We put a senior all-star team together up in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and I was involved with that team as well, just as an assistant coach. As a player, it would have been the Canada Games back in Newfoundland, '77. That was a good experience. We were lucky enough that we got to tour ourselves in Nova Scotia, PEI, I believe. We toured around Newfoundland for a week, promoting the sport of lacrosse, and then we returned back home, and we were back up there 2 weeks later playing the Canada Games. So that was a good experience. Doug Stramberg coached that team. He was mentored by Bill McBain, who was with us the year before. Bill coached the junior team in Nova Scotia, which I had the privilege of playing on. We went up to Windsor, Ontario, and learned a lot about lacrosse from Bill. Had a good time up there in Windsor, and having been coached by Bill. We have a lot of support from Ontario people. We partnered up with Peterborough there for a few years. John Grant Sr. took the midget team I had there. They took them out for a clinic there one afternoon and worked with them for a few hours. That was really good of John to do that. Rick Phillips on Ontario Lacrosse. Spent quite a bit of time with Rick there, learning to do coaching clinics because I'm a certified coaching instructor. So Rick taught me a lot about that, and he ran camps also in St. John. Chris Anderson was a huge factor. Colin Dole and Chris Driscoll came down from Ontario, and Brody Merle. They were here 3 or 4 times, and it was an awesome experience working with those guys. Oh yeah. Pick up the phone anytime you want. You can talk to Rick Phillips, just matter pick the phone up and calling him up and chat with him about anything. Probably our biggest challenge was the lack of history here in New Brunswick. They did play lacrosse back in the 1800s, field lacrosse in St. John, but that maybe hung around for about 10 years. Again, going back to the 1800s. So when you first start talking about lacrosse in St. John, try to get it going, and people heard of the sport. They knew it was the national sport, but that was about it. So that also affected when you are looking for coaches, people to coach the team. So basically you get your hockey coaches to step up and try to teach them the difference between hockey and lacrosse. And refereeing, it took a while to get referees established. So when we first started, when we got the Flanders Lacrosse Association going, it was the volunteers, people like myself and Tim Hunt, Mike Fox, Logan Brothers. We refereed every night. We were refereeing or coaching one or the other. And it took a couple of years before we got other people mentored enough that they could start refereeing. Steve O'Shaughnessy was a big help with the refereeing because Steve lived up in Fredericton, so he would come down and do clinics. So that was a huge bonus having Steve there, living so close. My motive for coaching at the provincial level for a good many years was to give the kids the best training they could possibly give them. So that meant a lot of traveling up to Ontario and out the West Coast here a few times. The intention was to get them knowing the game well enough that when they turn into adults, that they're going to come back and they're going to start coaching themselves or refereeing or volunteering at some level. And a good many of them did come back, and a good many of them did step up and volunteer or referee or coaching or whatever. Yeah. So some of them are still involved today as coaches. Probably the PeeWee team did well at the Nationals. I was quite pleased with the way they performed because those kids only been playing for a couple of years, so they worked really hard. And for kids that have only been playing the sport for a couple of years, I was pretty happy with them. Going up to Ontario and playing in the tournaments up there in Ottawa and Nepean and Gloucester, and having our midget teams win games against Ontario teams, that was pretty good because a few years ago we wouldn't even think about beating Ontario. Yeah. Probably the best game I could think of is I had a midget team. We were playing in Nepean, and we played against their midget rep team from Mississauga. And the kids from Mississauga were very confident when they stepped on the floor to play against us. But I had a good squad, and we ended up beating Mississauga, and it was just good lacrosse. It was well played by both teams, but we won the first game by 4 or 5 goals, whatever it was. We ended up playing them in the crossovers, and Mississauga was determined that they were going to beat us this time, but our guys pulled it off and beat them again. So that was a really proud moment for me because those kids, again, they worked hard, they were good players. And the Mississauga team was a very good team too. Working hard and learning the game as best you can, and being respectful of the other teams that you're playing against, and being respectful of your teammates, and hard work, and that was the big thing. Yeah. We started up a female league with the Fundy Lacrosse here. We ran with that for 3 or 4 years. They're high school and middle school level kids, and we had, I'm thinking 5 or 6 teams. So that went really well. The girls really had a good time there. We tried the field lacrosse with the girls, but we just didn't have enough girls come out for it. The field lacrosse and the boys worked out really well. One of the first things that Lacrosse New Brunswick got me to do back when I was tactical director was to start up field lacrosse from scratch. So I did that, got some really good volunteers together, and we ended up with, within a couple of years, we had 7 teams playing, and this would have been the U18 league. So with the league we formed, we called it the New Brunswick Field Lacrosse Alliance, and that went very well. So we played on weekends in a tournament format. We ended up playing with Brendan Smith and I put this Maritime Cup together for U18 and U15. So we would take turns hosting, and PEI was involved with that too. And that was pretty good. The kids had a lot of fun playing in that level. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we've Nova Scotia and Brunswick and PEI have always gotten along really well. We worked together to develop the game and helping each other out with tournaments and stuff like that. So, you know, I took a lot of teams to travel down to Halifax to go to tournaments. And one year, funding the lacrosse, we started up a rep league, and we really needed Nova Scotia to take part in that league in order to make it work. So we would host a tournament, and Nova Scotia would send up 3 or 4 teams to a tournament there, which is awesome on their part because they would show up at the rink on a Friday night and play each other sometimes. It's the way it was. You know, we had Moncton had a team, Perth Hanover, Fundy, Fredericton had a team, and then we had some teams Nova Scotia come up. So that lasted a few years, and that was pretty awesome. And in turn, we would get down to their tournaments down there. Yep, Lobster Trap. We won it one year. I had kids from St. John went down, like it was in '82, I believe it was. So hard-fought battle. It was a good experience. Kids worked really hard, and it was an awesome week. Yeah, it was really cool to see, be in the rink there and watch these. Because lacrosse, again, back in those days, were fairly new around here. Nobody knew how to play the game very well. And then they have Ontario come down. They sent quite a few teams down. And just to watch them play, and it was a good eye-opener to see how the game is supposed to be played and learn from them. Well, the most recent one was being put in the St. John Sports Hall of Fame. Having some lacrosse friends nominate me for the Sports Hall of Fame there for St. John, and being inducted into that. That was in 2017. Yeah, that was pretty good. There was about 8 or 9 of us in New Brunswick that got the Queen's Jubilee medal when they were handing those out. So I got that as well. So that was pretty good. So somebody nominated me for that. So that was much appreciated. I think one of the biggest things is having that the National Lacrosse League put a team here in Halifax. We have a lot of people from St. John that travel down here just to watch these games. Really? So they either stay overnight or they drive down and go right back to St. John. Yeah. And people from Moncton get down there too, so that's a huge thing. And hopefully have those players available for running clinics if they exactly. Locally, or see if we can get them to come up to New Brunswick. Another huge thing is having lacrosse back in the Canada Games. That is a huge thing for small provinces like New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. It motivates kids to come out, like the higher end athletes, to come out and take up the sport of lacrosse and take it more seriously for the boys and the girls. It's a huge thing. You have to have that professional presentation. People have to look at you seriously. That's where Bruce Logan excelled at. Like, he was really good at that, at promotion, presentation, stuff like that. So, he was a huge bonus to have him on board to make our sport look even more attractive. We had to work around spring hockey for the younger ones, and that was, so you had no choice but to work around it because hockey's hockey. Yeah. So you do your best with their going to tournaments, doing well, having good coaches on board that know what they're doing, and having people come down from Ontario to do camps. Like well-known people, like like Colin back when he was doing it, Chris Sanderson, and that. We have a good person working for New Brunswick now, Chet Gorowski, doing an outstanding job doing clinics and stuff like that. Extremely knowledgeable fella. and he's helping train coaches, and so he's going to bring that level up a few more notches. I guess just the relationships we have with people, and have a lot of fun that, and you know, being with the kids and watching the kids grow up. I always got a kick out of that. It's just watching the kids when you start working with them, or when they're 7, 8, 9 years old, and all of a sudden they're midget age, and then you see them as a high school and junior, or playing junior lacrosse now. A lot of the kids I coached back when they're 12, 13 years old, are, you know, moved up to playing junior level, and then they graduated from junior. And I've actually coached kids of people that I coach, like Mike Fox, for example. I coach all 3 of his boys, and they're all adults now. So, and a couple other kids I coached back when they were quite young, and next thing you know, I got their little ones on my bench. That's pretty fun. I haven't hit the grandchildren yet, but I'm expecting that soon. Well, the first one I picked up was a license plate off my vehicle. Everybody, I had this license plate on my vehicle now for more than 20 years. Everybody in the lacrosse community recognizes that license plate. And in the city of St. John, where I'm from, my vehicle's always recognized because of the license plate that's on it. Actually, I get a lot of questions asked by people, what does LAX mean? Very few people actually know what it means, so it gives me an opportunity to talk about lacrosse a little bit.
Not an airport in California.
Well, I get asked that question too, including at the border one time, and the customs agent asked me if this meant the airport in Los Angeles. One cool story though, driving down the highway one day in the truck I was driving, and this car from Ontario slowly drives past me, and I could see the window rolling down, and I saw the license plate on the vehicle was from Ontario, and then I see this little arm coming out of the window with the big thumbs up. It was hilarious. Yeah. So anyway, so I gave him a wave back. It was pretty funny experience. The other ones are gloves, donated by Chris Driscoll. Back years ago when Toronto Rock won their championship, Chris and Colin Doyle came down, and Brody Merle, or Blaine Manning, and did a clinic for the players in St. John and for the provincial teams that we had. And we were doing a lot of fundraising at the time, so Chris offered his gloves to be put in an auction to be sold off as part of the fundraising for the teams. So it happened to be close to my birthday, so my wife got in a bidding war with a couple people and ended up with the gloves. I won't say how much I had to pay for them, but anyway, I still have them. That's important to me because it was so awesome for Chris to donate those gloves. Those gloves had to have some sort of importance to him, and for him to donate those gloves to us to auction them off as a fundraiser meant a lot to us, because it speaks volumes about how people, the guys at that level there, treated us in New Brunswick, how they helped us out and were there for us when we needed them to be there and help us out and bring our level of our game up, because as I said before, we don't have any history in New Brunswick, and we don't have former senior A players to coach teams or whatever. We have to start from scratch, so they stepped up over the years to help us out quite a bit.